The outskirts of Sacramento are a place where time seems to slow down, caught between the industrial roar of the city and the quiet decay of the valley. In the neighborhood of Oak Creek, the houses were made of weathered wood, their porches sagging under the weight of decades of memories. This was where Jacob Thorne lived. He was a man of large hands and a quiet voice, a foreman at a local construction site who believed that a hard day's work was the highest form of prayer. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and burning orange, Jacob would sit on his porch. His wife, Sarah, would bring him a glass of cold lemonade, her laughter a soft melody that drowned out the distant hum of the freeway. Their 7-year-old daughter, Lily, would be chasing fireflies in the yard, her giggles echoing through the warm air. "We're lucky, Jake," Sarah would often say, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We're rich in all the ways that matter," Jacob would reply, his heart full. But the world outside Oak Creek was changing. Sacramento was growing, and with that growth came greed. A few miles away, in a penthouse made of glass and steel, Robert Kane was looking at a map of the city. To him, Oak Creek wasn't a neighborhood of families. It was a strategic development zone. It was a blank space on a map that needed to be filled with luxury condos and high-end retail. And he didn't care who he had to crush to get it. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a man in a sharp suit and a fake smile. He offered Jacob and his neighbors fair market value for their homes. But for people like Jacob, their homes were priceless. They were where their children were born, where their parents had died. Jacob stood at the front of the neighborhood meeting, his voice steady. "We aren't selling. This isn't just dirt and wood. This is our life." Robert Kane didn't take rejection well. He was a man used to getting what he wanted. He controlled the zoning boards, he had the mayor on speed dial, and he had a private security force that operated more like a street gang. When the legal threats didn't work, he turned to something darker. One rainy Tuesday, Jacob was walking to his truck after work. The construction site was deserted. Suddenly, 2 black SUVs pulled up, blocking his path. 4 men stepped out, led by Victor Rossi, Kane's primary enforcer. Rossi was a man with a scarred face and eyes that had seen too much violence. "Mr. Thorne," Rossi said, his voice like sandpaper. "Mr. Kane is a patient man, but even his patience has limits. Sign the papers and you walk away with a check. Don't sign and, well, things get complicated." Jacob didn't flinch. "Tell Kane to go to hell." The beating was systematic and brutal. They didn't use guns. They used iron pipes. They broke his ribs, they shattered his kneecaps, and finally, they struck him across the spine. Jacob lay in the mud, gasping for air, as the world faded to black. The last thing he heard was Rossi's voice. "This was just the introduction, Jacob. Don't make us write the first chapter." Jacob spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The doctors told him he might never walk without a cane again. His spine was damaged, his spirit battered. But Sarah and Lily were there every day, their love a flickering candle in the darkness. "We'll move, Jake," Sarah whispered, holding his hand. "The house doesn't matter. Only you do." Jacob nodded, his heart heavy. He was ready to give up. He was ready to let Kane win just to keep them safe. But Kane wanted to send a message to the rest of the neighborhood. He wanted to show them what happened to those who dared to lead a rebellion. On the night Jacob was finally discharged, he was sitting in his living room, his leg in a brace, watching Lily sleep on the sofa. Sarah was in the kitchen humming a song. Suddenly, the windows shattered. Bottles filled with gasoline and topped with burning rags, Molotov cocktails, flew into the house. The fire spread with terrifying speed. The old wood of the house was like tinder. Jacob tried to stand, but his legs collapsed under him. He crawled toward the sofa, screaming Lily's name. "Sarah! Lily!" The smoke was thick and black, stinging his lungs. He saw Sarah running from the kitchen, her clothes on fire. She reached for Lily, but a ceiling beam collapsed, separating them. Jacob watched in silent horror as the flames engulfed the 2 people who were his entire world. He tried to crawl into the fire, to die with them, but the heat was too intense, pushing him back. He was dragged out of the house by neighbors just as the roof caved in. Standing in the street, wrapped in a blanket, Jacob watched his life turn into a pillar of smoke. The police arrived, followed by the fire department. They took statements, they looked at the ruins, and the next day, the official report was released. Accidental fire caused by faulty wiring. Jacob knew the truth. He saw Victor Rossi's black SUV parked at the end of the block as the house burned. He saw the cold, mocking smile on Rossi's face. The system hadn't just failed him. It had actively protected his family's killers. For 6 months, Jacob Thorne disappeared. The people of Sacramento forgot about the man who lost his family in a tragic accident. But in the shadows of the city, a transformation was taking place. Jacob moved into a basement apartment in the industrial district. He spent every waking hour in a grueling, self-imposed training regimen. He used the pain in his back as fuel. He pushed himself until his muscles screamed, rebuilding his strength through sheer force of will that he wasn't alone. He found others who had been discarded by the city. He met Maya, a brilliant hacker whose father had been ruined by Kane's predatory lending. She lived in a world of code and encryption, her fingers moving like lightning across the keyboard. "I can get you into his servers, Jacob," she said, her eyes reflecting the blue light of her monitors. "I can show you every bribe, every illegal transaction, every life he's destroyed." Then there was Sam, a former Special Forces instructor who had been dishonorably discharged for exposing corruption in the military. He was a man of few words but lethal skills. "Revenge isn't about anger, Jacob," Sam told him as they sparred in a dimly lit gym. "Anger makes you sloppy. Revenge is about precision. It's about being a ghost. You don't just kill the man. You erase his legacy." Under Sam's tutelage, Jacob learned how to move in the dark, how to use his surroundings as a weapon, and how to strike with maximum impact. He became a student of Kane's habits, his weaknesses, and his fears. He was no longer Jacob Thorne, the construction foreman. He was something else. The neighbors in the industrial district started calling him the Shadow. The campaign began quietly. First, Kane's shipping containers were intercepted. Millions of dollars in illegal cargo, unregistered firearms, and narcotics were found by federal agents after an anonymous tip containing GPS coordinates and manifestos was sent to their headquarters. Then, Kane's secret bank accounts were drained. Maya bypassed his firewalls, transferring his offshore millions into a series of untraceable accounts that distributed the money to local charities and the families Kane had displaced. Kane was panicking. His investors were pulling out, his political allies were distancing themselves, and his enforcers were being picked off one by one. Not killed, but neutralized. Left tied up in front of police stations with folders of evidence pinned to their chests. Jacob's primary target was Victor Rossi. He tracked Rossi to a private club, a place where the city's elite went to indulge in their darkest vices. Jacob moved through the club like a breeze through tall grass. He bypassed the security cameras, disabled the guards, and cornered Rossi in his private office. Rossi reached for his gun, but Jacob was faster. He disarmed the man with a single, fluid motion and pinned him against the wall. "Do you remember me, Victor?" Jacob's voice was a low growl, devoid of emotion. Rossi's eyes widened as he looked into the cold, dead eyes of the man he thought he had broken. "Thorne, you're dead. You're supposed to be a cripple." "I was," Jacob said, his grip tightening. "But then I found a reason to get up. Tell me about the night of the fire. Tell me who gave the order." Rossi tried to lie, but Jacob's methods were persuasive. By the time he was finished, he had a recorded confession that linked Robert Kane directly to the arson and the murders of Sarah and Lily. He also had a list of every city official on Kane's payroll. The final confrontation took place at the Sacramento Dockyard, a labyrinth of rusted cranes and towering shipping containers. Kane had fled there, hoping to board a private freighter and escape the country. He had his last dozen loyal gunmen with him, all armed to the teeth. The night was thick with fog, the air smelling of salt and diesel. Jacob moved through the containers, a predator in his element. He used smoke grenades and flashbangs to disorient the guards, taking them down with silent efficiency. He was a blur of motion, a shadow that struck and vanished before they could even scream. Kane was standing on the pier, clutching a briefcase full of diamonds, his eyes darting around in terror. "Where are you? Show yourself." Jacob stepped out of the fog, 10 feet away. He wasn't carrying a gun. He didn't need one. "It's over, Robert," Jacob said. Kane pulled a small pistol from his pocket and fired. The bullet grazed Jacob's shoulder, but he didn't even flinch. He kept walking, his pace steady and relentless. Kane fired again, and again, his hands shaking so much that the shots went wide. Jacob reached him and struck. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution of justice. He dismantled Kane with a series of precise strikes, leaving the billionaire crumpled on the cold concrete. "Kill me?" Kane gasped, blood trickling from his mouth. "Just get it over with." Jacob looked down at him, the man who had destroyed his world. For a moment, the image of the burning house flashed in his mind. He heard Lily scream and saw Sarah's reaching hand. The rage was a physical weight in his chest, a dark tide begging to be released. But then he remembered Sam's words. Revenge isn't about anger. It's about precision. "No," Jacob said. "Death is too easy for you. You're going to live. You're going to watch as everything you built is torn down. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a concrete cell, knowing that a cripple from Oak Creek was the one who put you there." Jacob turned and walked away into the fog. Behind him, the sirens of the FBI and the state police were getting louder. Maya had sent them the location, along with the full confession and the evidence of Kane's global criminal network. Robert Kane was sentenced to life without parole. The mayor resigned in disgrace, and the police chief was indicted on multiple counts of racketeering. The neighborhood of Oak Creek was designated a historical landmark, protected from developers forever. Jacob Thorne never returned to his old life. He couldn't. The man he used to be died in the fire with his family. But in the darker corners of Sacramento, people tell stories. They talk about a man who appears when the law fails. They talk about a shadow that protects the weak and humbles the powerful. Jacob sits on a different porch now, overlooking the city he saved. He still feels the pain in his back, and he still sees Sarah and Lily in his dreams. He hasn't found peace. Perhaps he never will. But he has found a purpose. As long as there are men like Robert Kane, there will be a need for the shadow. And in the quiet nights of Sacramento, justice is no longer just a word. It is a promise kept in the dark.